Hey, all, Scott Horton here. It's always safe to say that one should keep at least some of your savings in precious metals as a hedge against inflation. And if this economy ever does heat back up and the banks start expanding credit, rising prices could make metals a very profitable bet. Since 1977, Robertson Roberts Brokerage Inc. has been helping people buy and sell gold, silver, platinum, and palladium, and they do it well. They're fast, reliable, and trusted for more than 35 years. And they take Bitcoin. Call Robertson Roberts at 1-800-874-9760 or stop by rrbi.co. All right, y'all, introducing Grant Smith from the Institute for Research Middle Eastern Policy. That's IRMEP, IRMEP.org, IRMEP.org. And here he has a new article. It's in the actual magazine of the Washington Institute. What is it called? No, I almost said the Israel Lobby.
Series policy.
No, not WINEP. It's WRMEA. What does it stand for again?
Washington Report on Middle East Affairs.
I knew that.
30 years.
I've only read this thing 100 times, this magazine of theirs. I don't know. The Washington Report on Middle East Affairs. And they've got a great website, too, WRMEA.org there.
Right. And you can see the digital issue of the latest magazine.
You can?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
good. I got the sneak preview PDF file, but you're saying they can get it online, too.
Absolutely. Just search for it. If you search for the article, which is what I was doing, dispatched from inside the signing ceremony for the $38 billion U.S.-Israel MOU, you think my antiwar.com article titles are long, you'll find it. So it's a special report.
Yeah, everybody put that in your favorite search engine, whichever brand you trust to protect your privacy. Dispatch from inside the signing ceremony for the $38 billion U.S.-Israel MOU. MOU, that sounds like some boring government acronym about a policy that sounds boring to me. Why should I care about something called some initials, Grant?
Well, because it's really an IOU. It's essentially a promise from the United States that it's going to give at least $38 billion over the next 10 years, starting in fiscal 2018, to Israel. And this is succeeding a previous IOU/MOU from the Bush administration. So it's extremely important, and it really commits, and as everyone's positioning it, although it's not true, shows that the U.S. is behind the Israeli government no matter what it does. It's essentially unconditional support, although it does have a couple of items which appear to be somewhat restrictive that we can talk about, but hugely important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's certainly an interesting way to put it, that the U.S. government stands behind their policies. We certainly arm them up. And, well, in what other ways does the U.S. stand behind Israel's policies?
I guess one way to frame it, right after Shimon Peres' funeral, after Barack Obama, President Obama, and several other U.S. officials went and came back from that funeral after the signing ceremony and after the execution of the $38 billion MOU, there was an announcement of new Israeli illegal settlements. And, you know, a lot of people noticed that although that can trigger some recriminations from the State Department, essentially they don't do anything about it in terms of actual penalties. So if this were another country and if this aid were not politically motivated, there would be actual repercussions in terms of something as serious as that, which is, you know, allegedly against U.S. policy. There would be actions to penalize it. And yet you get lip service on that and the cash register service on essentially unconditional support. And so, you know, just juxtaposing that, I think, is important. But this MOU does have a couple of, and I think we talked about this previously, a couple of mild changes. Number one, the Israelis are not supposed to buy commodities from the U.S. with it, like fuels. They're not supposed to, or they will no longer be allowed to spend a significant portion of this aid on their own military industrial complex and export-driven weapons systems, and essentially they're going to be forced to give back anything in excess of these amounts, according to the White House's description of the agreement. The actual agreement's not available. If they manage to get Congress to give them more, so this has caused some real separation of powers conflicts in a way no other previous MOU has.
Yeah. All right. Well, now as far as the $38 billion, I know that sounds like a lot, but aren't they just adjusting for inflation from the last one that was $30 billion? I mean, after all, they've got to print a lot of money in order to afford all this foreign aid.
It's a real increase. You're right. If you actually adjust the previous MOU for inflation, it's not that much more than what they were getting before, and it's certainly nowhere near the $5 billion a year that the Netanyahu government was seeking. So that is one thing, but I guess the thing to realize is that what this is doing is it's buying the very top, what I would argue are nuclear weapons capable delivery systems, aircraft, that sort of thing, that the Israelis couldn't get in any other way.
Now, does that include bombers, or you're talking F-16s and F-15s that can deliver nukes?
Fighter jets. Yeah, no heavy
fighter bombers, not heavy bombers.
Exactly. There were talks and some trial balloons floated after the Iran deal was signed, saying, it would be great if we gave B-52 bombers to the Israelis. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
You know what? How come they can't make their own heavy bombers? I mean, you could just convert a Boeing jumbo jet into a heavy bomber, couldn't you?
Yeah, you're getting out of my area of expertise.
Well, mine too, but it doesn't seem that impossible, for crying out loud. I don't know.
I think for their purposes, having the very best fighter bombers from the U.S., especially the stealth technology, is probably as much as they feel they need in their nuclear triad, which includes diesel-powered submarines, which everyone believes are nuclear capable, their Jericho missile systems. I mean, they've got a triad of ground-based, air-based, and submarine-based weapons. So that is extremely important. I mean, back in the day, Israel was getting a lot more just sort of donor aid from U.S. donor groups that wanted to support Israel, but they couldn't really get top-shelf weapons until around the Nixon-Johnson, LBJ Nixon administration, when they really put the hammer down and lobbied for this stuff. And it's been key for them in terms of having this, what they call a qualitative military edge, but is really just a conventional qualitative edge, since they do have a military edge that's strategic. And of course, that's the interesting part and a big part of our lawsuit, which is trying to pry out all of these secrets about Israel's nuclear weapons program that the U.S. government holds but doesn't want to release, because technically they're not supposed to give aid to clandestine nuclear powers. But anyway, that's getting a little bit further away from the MOU.
No, that's right. Stick with that for a second, because you mentioned in the article about how Colin Powell's emails are out now. And we have this confirmed 100 ways. I mean, Jimmy Carter is a former president of the United States. If he says that Israel has nukes, that's not a question of whether or not they do. That's an official, authoritative source telling you it's a fact. Same thing with former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, former Secretary of State Colin Powell. If he says Israel has nukes, it doesn't matter if, the Russians supposedly hacked the WikiLeaks or whatever it was. However it was we got that. That's in the public domain now. Isn't that it? Isn't the game up on pretending to not know that Israel has nuclear weapons?
Well, you would think so, but, John Kirby, who's the State Department spokesperson, on September 16 during a press conference had exactly that question placed to him, and he essentially stood up behind the podium to this question about Colin Powell's email in particular, and he deflected. He said, shouldn't you talk to Colin Powell about that? And I'm not going to talk about leaked email traffic. Mm-hmm. And so, the reporter tried to go back to him several times. Kirby continued to say, I think I've answered your question. Then he said, I'm not going to talk about intelligence matters, all responding to this Colin Powell phrase that the boys in Tehran know Israel has 200 all targeted on Tehran. So they're continuing to pretend that that information isn't in the public domain, that it's a secret, that they don't have to respond to any sort of public pushback, asking why, if there are laws against providing aid to clandestine nuclear power, why, when this is so broadly known, they don't actually follow the law. And that is the core of the lawsuit that we're amending tomorrow against this slew of defendants saying...
Well, and if there's a law, if there's such a thing as law in general, you ought to be able to win, right? Because we've already seen plenty of precedents where so-called secret programs or secret buried truths or whatever get exposed, and then therefore their secrecy is no longer a valid argument in court. We saw that with the drone strikes, at least to a degree, where they brag about the drone program enough that at least one federal judge, I think, decided that you can no longer say that this is all secret when it's right there in the front page of the Washington Post. For example, they announced their intent to murder Al-Awlaki with a drone about a year or so before they finally got a chance to do it.
Right. But there are,
right?
It's happened, but there's no blanket precedent that we can point to. Believe me, I've looked for it, saying in all cases, the government, whenever anything is in the public domain, in all cases, the government has to take appropriate action and respond to that.
That makes sense, I guess.
Right. Plausible deniability. This is no longer plausible. Believe me.
That's the thing. So that's how you argue the case then, is you say, Your Honor, we have the following incredible number of exhibits here, and that amounts to something beyond just Pal's emails here. That kind of thing?
No, that's not the most important thing with this case. And it's not, because this is not a FOIA case. At heart, this is a case saying that there's a policy called, nuclear ambiguity, and it's hurting people who are trying to do their reporting function. So it's not saying that we're being denied information. It's saying that there's a policy, an actual gag order that was not put in place according to the Administrative Procedures Act that has caused tangible harm to investigative reporting, and that not only should they declare that gag order to be illegal and force the government to stop implementing it as a legislative rule, but they should also take the logical action and say, because this has been put in place to protect the aid delivery, we're also going to issue an injunction against future aid. Or the president can do what he has to do under the Symington and Glenn Amendment, which is this technical rule about foreign nuclear states receiving aid, and issue a waiver explaining why the U.S. should continue to provide foreign aid even though it knows Israel is a nuclear power. So we're trying to get the truth to have a policy impact. But the first hurdle, Scott, is to prove and to show that we have standing in court to do this. And that's different than a regular FOIA case. This is much more like a regular old, court battle where you have to show that you've been an injured party.
Right. All right. Now, so to get back to the memo here about the aid, I think I have a correction where I've been joking for a long time that the Constitution forbids Congress from appropriating money for more than 2 years at a time to the military. In order to, protect against permanent standing armies, and how, but geez, it doesn't say anything about time limits on appropriations for Israel and their military. But then, actually, no, I'm wrong about that. This is just a memorandum of understanding with the executive branch, and that actually, in this memorandum of understanding, as you say, they have to go back to Congress every year for the money.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So I'm wrong. Don't listen to me, everybody. What the hell do I know?
No, I think people should understand how it works functionally. People heard this $38 billion signing, whatever, and they thought the money already went out the door, and it hasn't. It has not gone out the door. Congress has a couple of different pieces of pending legislation, such as S 3363, which is an emergency supplemental appropriations act for the defense of Israel, which wants an additional $1.5 billion above the expiring $3.1 billion MOU for missile defense. And it's got other parts of just the regular old State Department funding bills that would actually fund the expiring MOU. So yeah, Congress it has to pass this, and the president has to sign it into law. And they've typically been doing this as omnibus appropriations acts in December because there's been so much disarray in Congress. So they will probably sign an omnibus bill if we don't get our way with this court case in December with that component in it, where they would get their MOU money as well. And there is going to be a fight over whether this executive order can actually dictate to Congress what they can or cannot do in response to all of the Israel lobbying organizations and the Israeli government.
Right. Yeah, we'll show you. We're going to give them even more money than that.
Right.
You can't limit
$10 billion
us.
a year. There you go. Yeah. And then force the president to veto it.
Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah. Can you
imagine?
That'll
be the day. I like to see that. They make it $380 billion. He'd still sign it.
Right. But just the bottom line, for the past 10 years, all of these MOU payments have been included in a piece of legislation called Department of State Foreign Operations and Related Programs Appropriations Act. And that's where the State Department budget is. That's where all their foreign aid is. And they have always been passing it within an omnibus spending bill that just includes many, many other spending authorizations in December. So they don't have the money yet. And it may not be, 3.1 billion of the last MOU or, 3.1 plus 1.5. It's going to be a very interesting time to see what happens with foreign aid.
Hey, man, so tell us a little bit about the event where you went to the signing ceremony here and apparently got the creeps pretty bad.
Yeah, I was a little bit creeped out. I mean, the State Department put up very suddenly an announcement that they would deign to have some reporters come in and report on the event, provided they didn't ask any questions, and they stood in the back of the room so that the honored guests could sit in the nice seats. And it was a real turnoff. I'm used to writing analysis and opinion. I don't typically go to report on anything, but I grabbed a camera and headed over to the State Department. They looked over my credentials very carefully, which were to write an article for this magazine. They took away all of our cell phones. We were funneled into the back of the room and had a bunch of minders standing around us, making sure that we didn't ask questions of the guests. And I did want to ask the new head of the ADL what he thought of all of this, but I couldn't. I was prevented from doing anything other than snapping a few photos and then being rushed out as Debbie Wasserman Schultz and John Kerry rushed in to talk to all of these people who were celebrating the MOU signing. So it was a very creepy experience. It was something that other reporters were complaining about, that they thought that they had a right to ask questions. And it was just, I didn't want to go, but I felt I really needed to, just to see how it really works. And this is a culmination of a lot of intense lobbying, and it's a very, it's a very interesting ceremony / opportunity not to ask questions. But of course, the invited guests who were funneled in from a nice annex on the side were all allowed to keep their phones, have selfies with John Kerry and Wasserman Schultz and the Israeli dignitaries, and it was basically a private party where, again, they allowed the press to catch a glimpse and roll the cameras, but hustled us all out, gave us our phones back, and shoved us out the door. Mm-hmm. So, not something I want to do again. But,
what is this lobbying you speak of?
Oh, well, that would be the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, which is the consolidating organization for 50 other organizations that form the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, which lobby for this aid. And they're spending a lot of money. They're related to fundraising organizations across the United States. Aid to Israel is a top initiative. They send out these petitions for all of their members to fill out and send to their representatives so that they pass resolutions saying that it's important to pass this MOU and provide defense spending. And they also solicit donations so that they can lobby Congress. And then they're tangentially related to political action committees in which many of the executives of these nonprofit organizations are also members to steer campaign contributions to preferred politicians. A lot of times campaign committees in various states are formed of the exact same members as a lot of these Israel affinity organizations. And, they're just working this issue constantly. And in the meantime, there's nothing like it on any sort of opposite side in terms of money, organizing power, active lobbying, et cetera, et cetera. But they get the job done. They raise billions of dollars. And, not all of it is just paid out to politicians. A lot of it's just sort of spread around, creating good messages, goodwill, that sort of thing. But, as it says in the article, we're talking about a $6.3 billion industry of just 331 of these organizations by 2020. And if they weren't doing it, there really would be no aid package. The U.S. wouldn't be giving more aid to Israel than any other country. It would probably receive very little. But because you have this massive political operation, you've got, the lion's share of foreign aid going to Israel, very little going to other countries in comparison. And they are the biggest cumulative recipient now.
Hey, y'all, Scott Horton here. Are you a libertarian and or peacenik? Live in North America? If you want, you could hire me to come and give a speech to your group. I'm good on the terror war and intervention, civil liberty stuff, blaming Woodrow Wilson for everything bad in the world, Iran, central banking, political realignment, and, well, everything. I can teach markets to liberals and peace to the right. Just watch me. Check out scotthorton.org/speeches for some examples and email me, scott@scotthorton.org for more information. See you there.
By the way, did I mention that you're the author of Big Israel and a whole bunch of other great books about the Israel lobby? No, I didn't. Just now I did.
Yeah, thank you.
But before I forgot.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's sitting on my pile, but I'm all up to my eyeballs in Afghanistan still here.
There you go.
But yeah, Big Israel, that's the book. Before that was Divert, about how they stole weapons-grade uranium from the United States of America for their nuclear weapons that we're all supposed to pretend doesn't exist. This is the guy that wrote the book on that and a lot of other great stuff before that, too. And in fact, a whole string of books, what is it, 8 or 10 books now about the Israel lobby in America and including their crimes. How many?
Well, right.
What's the total?
Yeah, it's 8 now.
It's 8.
And, really starting off with where a lot of people started really taking notice, which is this clean break plan, which seemed to dictate sort of the Bush administration conflicts being pushed by the neocons. And then, coming up to the present, talking about foreign agents is about the AIPAC espionage flap and kind of where AIPAC came from, and for America's defense line about the Justice Department's battles to register as foreign agents, various Israel lobbying groups. So, yeah, I've been writing about it for a long time. They've never ceased to provide material.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to note that, number one, although they claim to represent a vast majority of Jewish Americans, actually they don't. If they represent 15%, that would be on the high end. But they do have a lot of big donors, and they do make a lot of noise, and they provide a lot of pressure, and they can be pretty intense in terms of trying to squelch opposition. And, they've never worried too much about moving classified information around. So it's a very interesting set of organizations, but they don't always win. And I think their biggest loss so far has been the Iran nuclear deal. Mm-hmm. They would have preferred to just keep that stringing along or not sign it. But so not omnipotent, not all powerful either. They can be beaten.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also they went way out on a limb pushing for the attack on Syria in August and September 2013 and lost on that.
Right.
That was another big failure on their part.
A lot of pushing for that as well.
They were basically the only ones pushing for that in the whole country. I think they didn't really realize that it was all silence and no echo from the rest of the country of what they were pushing on that one.
Right. And I think I've heard on your show several times the evidence is so flimsy for that, and the desire to open up yet another front within the American populace was so low. Absolutely. You're right. That was a major loss as well. Of course, these things can always circle back. And since then, the U.S. has been, doing some attacks directly. So it's, you can never say that a particular fight is over, because oftentimes, more than not, in the long term or even medium term, what they were lobbying for, actually happens. But, again, we spoke about the fact that one of the reasons that there isn't very much ability to question the State Department outside of courtrooms is that I think they understand now, whether it's Shibli Telhami's work or some of the polls we've done, or even other polls like Gallup, if you read them carefully, this aid package is not very popular with the American public. Additional money that could be spent on, veterans care, education, whatever. They would rather put the money somewhere else. And I think that's guiding a lot of the activity in terms of keeping the debate from happening and not allowing people to ask questions.
Yeah. Well, and that's such an important point, too, about where that money could be spent instead here in the United States, whether in terms of people just keeping their own money or government spending it on something other than helping Israel kill people, that kind of thing. And, I was challenged recently by, if I read it right, it was on Twitter. If I read it right, it was, I think, a conservative who was challenging me, saying, hey, how do you back up the statement that America subsidizes Israel's socialism? And I just replied, well, because dollars are fungible.
Right.
And that was the end of the conversation. Oh, yeah. Right. I guess so, I assume was what he thought in response to what I wrote, because that's really true. So not only is this money that could have been spent on something else here in the United States, but it's providing money for the Israeli government so that they can spend money on those things for their people that the Americans mostly want for themselves. Free college and free health care and all this stuff is going on in Israel on our dime.
Right. I don't think people get that. And, in Twitter, it's pretty tough to be nuanced with the number of characters you're allowed. But we also make the argument that this aid is doing exactly what the people who imposed the bans on the aid to nuclear states, John Glenn and Stuart Symington, wanted to prohibit. I mean, by providing all of these delivery vehicles, the fighter bombers, we're really freeing up enough money for the Israelis to continue to develop their nuclear program. And, that's fungibility right there as well.
Right.
So it's, it's a really interesting case, and we're about to make a couple of big moves here in November to really force the issue. But it's, unfortunately, although it's been all over the Israeli press and U.S. alternative media, as can come to be expected, for some reason, mainstream reporters are not interested in the lawsuit. And the one good thing is, though, instead of assigning a junior attorney to the case, they've assigned someone who's got a lot of experience and, as far as I can tell, isn't just out of law school, Michelle Bennett, who's handled some big cases for the Justice Department. So I hope that is an indication of seriety, at least on the Justice Department side, that the U.S. media hasn't exhibited.
Yeah. All right, now one last thing here, Grant, is I like this. Your quote of Susan Rice in her little presentation here during the MOU ceremony. She claimed an unshakable commitment to Israel's security and asserted that, quote, our security is linked, end quote, without explaining how. So that's my question for you, Grant. How is America's security linked with Israel's, do you think?
I think it's linked in the not to their security, but our security is linked to the extent that they don't make any serious moves to resolve their issues with the Palestinians, and they antagonize people who then hit back at the U.S. So if you want to stretch that, you would say that our security is linked to what the Israelis choose to do independently of what we want them to do. But when she said that, and if you watch the video, it was so patently obvious that she doesn't believe that. I mean, I can't believe she believes that. She was literally delivering this stuff deadpan because it is so ridiculous.
Oh, that's funny. I want to watch that.
So
now.
that was the reason for being there, was just to see, you read the transcript and it sounds like there's a true commitment there, but then you look at the faces of the people, and John Kerry bouncing in at the end of the thing because he didn't seem to want to be on the
he's waiting out in the hallway during
he was waiting until the cameras are being taken down, basically. So he bounced in very late to do the glad handing. I mean, it was interesting to see how these words were delivered, because I mean, there's no rational, and nobody even makes the argument anymore that the security of the two countries are linked. They're not, and the aid is not delivered in any American strategic interest that anyone's ever identified. It's really is because of politics. So, but you have to see it to not believe it too. Sometimes you can just not believe it, or you can go see people delivering these words and not believe it. And I think that's powerful as well.
Hey, Grant, is it true that you're doing another conference?
Well, yes, Scott. As a matter of fact, we're doing another conference, and the URL of the registration site's Israel Lobby and AmericanPolicy.org. And through the month of October...
Whoa, you're talking way too fast now. Israel what and dot something?
Yeah, it's Israel Lobby and AmericanPolicy.org is the URL for more information.
Okay, you're gonna have to come up with something else for that, dude.
We've done the short URLs. We're doing long URLs, and that's final, Scott. But
that's a really long URL.
It is. But I just wanted to mention that we were really starting to promote this event, and if people have been to the previous events or look at them online, you can see why. But we're having $73 tickets to commemorate the October 1973 Arab-Israeli War, so you can get those through the end of the month. If you're planning on coming to Washington, you're making your plans early, you don't have to pay the full ticket price for lunch and the reception and all the great speeches and interactions at the National Press Club. You can actually get a discount if you plan ahead. So we're sticking with the URL, Israel Lobby and AmericanPolicy.org for now. I'll take it into consideration that is a pretty long URL, but they're getting scarce. They're not making URLs anymore, I don't think.
Yeah, I know what you mean. All right. Well, and now this is happening when again?
Yeah, the actual event is March 24 in 2017. So, but that is the beginning of Cherry Blossom Festival, and it'll be here before you know it. So plan ahead, think about it, look at the other events, see how important and unique this event is. And if you want to come, buy a ticket early.
Yeah. By the way, is there a page that has the archives from the previous conferences all in one place?
Yeah, if you just head over to irmep.org, earmep.org, and go to conferences, all of them are there.
Great.
And each conference has its own website, has all the transcripts, all the video. And so if you go all the way back to the National Summit to reassess the U.S.-Israel special relationship, you can see, that start to finish, and all the other conferences, including previous ones like one in 2003 about the clean break plan that we did on Capitol Hill.
Oh, really? I've never seen that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was cool. Back... a lot of younger-looking people on that video. So,
yeah,
but,
hey, listen, man, I don't think anybody could overstate, even you bragging about it. What a great job you've done putting these conferences on, and all the great people that you've brought, and the quality of their speeches and the things imparted. I mean, the guy, the FBI agent who gave the speech about the Pollard
Marion
case,
Bowman.
and
Marion.
I mean, and there's a million of them. I mean, they're so good. Jim Loeb last year saying,
he was great.
Here, he's such a gentle guy. I love Jim Loeb. here's the story of the neoconservatives in a nutshell. And it's just the hardest hitting thing in the whole world. Talk about deadpan. He's just great.
There's a real diversity.
And there's a million of them. There's a million. They're so good. So everybody go to irmep.org, watch 100 speeches, and then sign up to, is that where they go to sign up to for the new one?
Yeah, the new one is
they can find the link from there at least, right?
Right there, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good deal. Israel Lobby and AmericanPolicy.com.
Thank you.
Not .org, right? .com?
Either one will get you there.
Okay.
Of course, we registered.com.
Yeah. Israel Lobby and AmericanPolicy.com, and you can find the link from IRMEP. That is the website of the Institute for Research, Middle Eastern Policy, the great Grant Smith, author again of Big Israel. Thank you very much, Grant. Appreciate it.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks.
All right, y'all. That's the show. Check out the archives at libertarianinstitute.org/Scott Horton Show. That's the new thing. You got to sign up for the new RSS feed over there. I wonder if there's a way I can smuggle my old RSS feed over to Libertarian Institute and just have it forward. You think that would work? libertarianinstitute.org/Scott Horton Show. Hey, Scott Horton here to tell you about this great new book by Michael Swanson, The War State. In The War State, Swanson examines how Presidents Truman, Eisenhower, and Kennedy both expanded and fought to limit the rise of the new national security state after World War II. If this nation is ever to live up to its creed of liberty and prosperity for everyone, we are going to have to abolish the empire. Know your enemy. Get The War State by Michael Swanson. It's available at your local bookstore or at Amazon.com in Kindle or in paperback. Just click the book in the right margin at scotthorton.org or thewarstate.com.
I love Bitcoin, but there's just something incredibly satisfying about having real, fine silver in your pocket. That's why commodity discs are so neat. They're 1-ounce rounds of fine silver with a QR code on the back. Just grab your smartphone's QR reader, scan the coin, and you'll instantly get the silver spot price in Federal Reserve notes and Bitcoin. And if you donate $100 to the Scott Horton Show, he'll send you one. Learn more at facebook.com/commoditydiscs. commoditydiscs.com.